Bryce Hall is fighting Kimbo Slice Jr. What the heck? Yo, you were watching the Dropout 704 podcast and you're here with your host, Samaj Sinclair. So I was watching George Janko's show the other day and Bryce Hall was talking about the fact that he's about to fight Kimbo Slice's son. If y'all don't know who Kimbo Slice is like the father of bare knuckle fighting. Kimbo Slice got famous because he would just find people and be like, "Will you fight me?" And he would just record it. Like backyard fights. If you guys know Jorge Masvidal came up in Kimbo Slice's like backyard promotion. I personally think that Kimbo Slice is a legend. Shout out to Kimbo Slice. He's done so much for the fight game, so much for the fight industry. So his son, I'm sure, grew up in it and has some sort of something. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm sure that he has a passion from it that he gets from his father, and I'm sure he's dedicated. What's interesting is that I have not heard of him prior to this, but he comes from a big name, so it's a big name thing. And he's fighting Bryce Hall. If I was Bryce Hall, first off, you're not fighting Kimbo Slice, but you're still fighting his son. Kimbo Slice is a genetic specimen. He's a big dude, strong dude, you know what I'm saying? So I'm sure his son has good genetics and it's not gonna be some twerk. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be a good fight. It should be a good fight. I'm sure he's a good enough opponent, especially when you're looking at a dude like Bryce Hall. Because first off, Bryce Hall doesn't have a lot of experience, but he has some experience. He has taken a bare knuckle fight from what I remember, I don't think that he was necessarily winning the fight, but it don't matter because he won the fight because he caught him, and that's all that matters. Especially when you're fighting bare knuckle, it really just takes one shot. With that being said, if he lands that one shot on Kimbo Slice's son, that'll be super cool for him. If he gets knocked out by Kimbo Slice's son, like it's really like a win-win for Bryce Hall. For Kimbo Slice's son, it's kind of a win-lose because it's like he gets to knock out Bryce Hall, you know what I'm saying? But like even if he gets knocked out by Bryce Hall, like Kimbo Slice's son wasn't really famous anyway, so it's just a thing that's happening, you know what I'm saying? But I do want to see Bryce Hall win because Bryce Hall said that he has talked to Dana White. And Dana White told Bryce Hall that if he wins this fight, he'll talk to him about doing a one off fight in the UFC. One, I think that would be super sick. And two, I just think that that's good for the company, good for the UFC. Especially because Bryce is doing some bare knuckle fights, so it's not like he's done no fights or nothing at all. You know, it's not like just like Will Smith and some other guy, like just these two random like Bryce Hall. Yeah, he's done the like celebrity fights and stuff, but he's actually getting a real fight career and fighting other fighters. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of respect for him, a lot of respect to him for that. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think it would be bad if Dana let him do a fight in the UFC. I think that's really good for the UFC and opens up a lot of doors because when you see these fights where Floyd is fighting McGregor or this and that. It's always boxing. And like I don't get that. Why is it always boxing? Like when you're talking about a fight, you should do a fight. MMA is fighting. Boxing is boxing. No disrespect to boxers. I'm not saying boxing is easy. You know, 9 times out of 10, the boxer beats the MMA guy at boxing, but a fight is so different. If we are in a fight and you're limiting me to this instead of my elbows, my knees, my kicks, I could take you I could wrestle, I could choke. Like that is a fight. That's the real world. If you're out in the streets, no one's gonna be like, hey bro, you can't kick. They could, but come on, dog, you're in the street, you know what I'm saying? So yes, they're both a sport, but one's a specific skill set that, like I'm saying, still deserves the utmost respect. But I think that people understand the difference between boxing and fighting, and the UFC is already the biggest fight organization. So I think that people will see these bigger names in the UFC because that's the thing with the UFC is there's not a lot of big names. Like obviously you got McGregor, and it's just hard to try to recreate that. Do I think that Bryce Hall's going to sit there and get into the UFC and win a championship belt or something? Not necessarily. I'm not saying that it's impossible. Anything's possible if you put your mind to it. But I don't think that that's necessarily what it's going to be. But do I think that he can go in there and get a one off fight with someone else in whatever division he goes? Like I could see Bryce Hall. I mean, I can see him at 55 because of what he weighs right now. But just size wise, I don't know. 55 is a tough division. I don't know if he can make 45. If he could, that might be a good division. But like if he runs into Elia, he's done so. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I'm sure there's some. Nah, there honestly most of these are 55 that I'm thinking of off the top of my head would like probably smoke Bryce, but I'm sure that there's someone who's just under the radar because that's a stacked division. Let's be fair. I mean, honestly, the UFC right now almost all the divisions are stacked, but I digress. I think that if Bryce goes in there and he beats a dude who's decent, and remind you this, Bryce isn't he has some boxing experience. He has bare knuckle experience, so you know that this kid's got grit. And if I'm not mistaken, he was a wrestler, you know what I'm saying? So it's not like he's a complete scrub himself. Is he at the level of a UFC professional athlete? I don't know, only one way to find out. But one thing about being a professional athlete is, you got to also remember a lot of these guys they're just a human being. You know what I'm saying? And it only takes a punch. And yeah, it seems crazy because they're in the UFC, and the UFC does have the best guys. I personally believe that. And I used to think that I would go to like any promotion, but as I get older, I realize like the UFC is the place to be. And if I fight in any other promotion, I'm doing it out of America for America. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, I'm excited for this fight. I want to see how it's going to play out. Bryce Hall versus Kimbo Slice Jr. That's going to be a banger. If Bryce Hall wins, he might get a fight in the UFC, which is going to be super sick. Really good for the UFC. If Jake Paul and Dana didn't have their grievances, I think that Jake Paul could also do that into the UFC. Maybe Logan will. I don't know. Maybe we'll see more of these guys get into the UFC and fight actual guys. But it might dilute it a little bit if they're not really trying to get up in the rankings. But also, it's gonna be so good for the sport. I think that if you start doing this, I think that if you got a Jake Paul fight in the UFC, I think it would break McGregor's numbers. 100%. I think that Jake Paul could do better numbers than McGregor. At this point, I definitely think that. I think Bryce Hall could do some good numbers. I don't think that he would necessarily do McGregor numbers, but I think that he would be one of the bigger guys in the promotion. And he wants to do a one-off thing, but hopefully he does it. Hopefully he runs through Kimbo Slice Jr., gets his one-off fight in the UFC. If he does well, maybe he'll take this a little seriously and try to get a couple more. Like I said, I'm not sure what division he would go into, and these divisions are stacked with some real dangerous dudes. So it wouldn't be easy. But you gotta also think about these dudes. Like a lot of these dudes training, like they have day jobs and they got things that they have to do in order to get to the UFC. Just because you're in the UFC does not mean you're rich. Do not forget that. So, but when you are rich, like I think the reason Jake Paul is so good is because he doesn't need to be doing it. He has the money. He has so much money. He has the money to pay for the best trainers, get the best recovery, the best meal plans, all these things. It's just do you have the will to do it? So, if Bryce Hall has the will, I'm not counting him out. Not counting him out at all. We're gonna see how this fight goes for Kimbo Slice Jr. His last fight in the BKFC, I saw some highlights. I saw him talk about it, but I did not personally watch it. This fight, I will be watching, and I'm excited for his career. I want to see where it goes. Hopefully, it goes somewhere special. That he does some cool stuff, and maybe he'll be on the show when they talking about it. You know what I'm saying? But hey, comment down below what you guys are thinking about this. Let me know what you think about Bryce Hall. Let me know what you think about, Jake and Dana's relationship, all this stuff, man. It's crazy right now. You know what I'm saying? Hey, this is the Dropout 704 podcast. Like, comment, subscribe. Mess with your boy on Instagram. I'm responding to all DMs. Peace out.